Hello and welcome to this edition of the program, People, Politics and Power. I am Imoni Amarere. It is 2 days before Nigeria marks the 25th anniversary of its return to democratic rule following the exit of the military in 1999. It has been a quarter of a century of uninterrupted practice of the presidential system of democracy. Some say it has been a difficult road to travel, especially for those who thought that democracy is a magic wand that would automatically set right all that was wrong with the process of governance in Nigeria. The road has been laced with a lot of challenges and landmines, such as insecurity and difficult economic conditions. But there have also been some positive and remarkable landmarks along the way. In the last 25 years, Nigeria has successfully conducted 7 election cycles and 4 hitch-free transitions from one president to another. In 25 years, Nigerians have elected 5 presidents, with 2 of them running the whole hog of 2 terms of 8 years each. Nigerians have also elected state governors and legislators for as many times during those election cycles. However, some analysts contend that for a better part of the 25 years of democratic rule, Nigeria has been plagued by serious economic, social, ethno-religious, and security challenges that tend to want to make people lose faith and confidence in the anticipated and promised dividends of democracy. So, beyond the sometimes rancorous elections and transitions, what have been the major landmarks of 25 years of democracy that the people can point at and hold on to? What have been the challenges of keeping the country as a going democratic concern? What have been the critical landmines on the way, if any? And what lessons have been learned? And what is the future of democracy in Africa's most important and populous country? Well, join me to look at these last 25 years and as we also make projection into the future on people, politics, and power. And I'm joined in the studio by 2 gentlemen, and of course, we have a third guest joining us virtually from Lagos, Professor Adele Jinodu, a renowned political scientist, is joining us from Lagos. Thank you so much, Professor Jinodu, for finding time to join us.
Good afternoon. My pleasure to be your guest again.
Welcome. Also joining us here in the studio is Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. He is the Dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies at Bayes University and a former political editor with the Guardian newspaper. He was there from the beginning in 1999. Thank you so much, Abiodun, for finding time to join us.
Thank you.
Also joining us is Dr. Billy Gillis Harry, an economist and the national president, Petroleum Products Retail Outlets Owners Association of Nigeria. Professor Harry, thank you so much.
Thank you. I'd like to be a professor too.
One day.
I'm just
Welcome. All right. So let's begin our discussion. Professor Jinodu, 25 years of uninterrupted democratic journey. What have been those landmarks? Or what would you say are those things that have made this 25 years tick?
Yeah.
Professor,
thank you, Imoni.
Yes. Go ahead.
It's a very difficult question you're asking, but let me try and navigate my way through it. You know, democracy is not something that you can say is dead or dying once it is out of the bottle. I think democracy has come to stay. It's a struggle, not just even a process, it's a struggle between forces that want to put the spirit, the journey, back into the bottle, and those who want to give it free rein so that it can create possibilities. So democracy is a kind of a perpetual crisis between those who want to advance the possibilities of democracy and those who want to put democracy back in the bottle and make it become a prisoner in the bottle. I think that struggle in Nigeria started several years ago. In fact, it reached its peak between 1950 and independence, and it has continued even through military rule in this country. And I think military rule itself was part of the struggle of democracy, and the resistance of democracy is being put back into the bottle. And there are those who were fighting for democracy in the country. So I think this is not just the case with Nigeria, it happens everywhere. And I think there's a general crisis of democracy all over the world, even in the so-called advanced democracy. But I think if you look at our own context, I think you cannot talk of democracy without talking of federalism as well. And I think since 1951, that struggle has
We seem to have lost the audio from Professor Jinodu right there. We hope that he's able to reconnect immediately. But for now, let me come back here to the studio. Professor Biodun Adeniyi, ask the same question. What has been your take of our 25 years democratic journey?
Well, I think, for me, I think there's quite a lot to share, if we put democracy in its proper context. Sometimes we want to equate democracy or we want to expect so much from it in terms of development, in terms of physical features, that the system of government has probably brought about. But no, that's not the essence of democracy. Democracy has some innate values, and those values are about freedom, about integration, about inclusion, and of course, increased representation, which we have seen in the last 25 years. Now, compare it with a military regime, or even a dictatorship, an authoritarian regime, where you hardly have voice, people, voices are muffled, people disappear, people's wishes and aspirations might be met in the physical, but of course, when it comes to freedom of expression, freedom of speech, those ones disappear. We cherish democracy in history, more in terms of the intangibles, because even a government that is not democratic can also bring the tangibles in terms of physical development as much as democracy can bring about. But the problem with our own is it's fine if we're celebratory about marking the milestone, 25 years of democracy. It's fine, quite all right. In terms of longevity, this is the longest republic we're going to have since the evolution since post-independent period. And of course, being the longest period is something to cheer. But of course, we also have to be mindful about the content, the character of our democracy. That's what we're still having problems with. And how do we grow that content, that character? We can grow it in terms of attitudinal change, in terms of character of the leaders, in terms of subscription to higher values, of providing order-centered kind of leadership, so that the thinking, will be around the need to leave legacies like we're seeing in other parts of the world. And there are so many reasons why we have to be hopeful. Yes, if we are succeeding at the level of longevity, then we can begin to increase our effort in terms of the value we're going to be adding to it going forward, as the case could be. And of course, there are so many examples we can cite around the world. Oftentimes we talk about Singapore, right? Singapore didn't grow under a democracy. Lee Kuan Yew, to some extent, a dictator as the case could be, because he ruled for nearly 30 years. There's development in China, it's not a democracy. There's development in the United States, in Russia, it's not a democracy. And that's why we need to be concerned about the tangible and the intangible. So democracy is not equivalent to the provision, essentially, of dividend of democracy, like we often want to say, because each time we're talking about dividend, we're talking about physical benefit, infrastructure, fulfillment of life expectations, and all such things, structures that we could say are evidence of development. No, there's more to it. Yes, it can come with these ones, but the more thing that we should be concerned about are the values of democracy, which is why we often say there is a system of government that is closest to godliness, because it is inclusive, it is integrative, it is representative, and of course it connects with the wish of God, for every human being, as the case could be.
Right, I'll come back to you later to ask a very salient question. You were there at the beginning in 1999, in fact 1998, when the political parties were just evolving and emerging and all of that. And if you look back at that time and think of what the expectations were then and what the situation is today, we'll talk about that. But first, let me go to Dr. Billy Gillis-Harry and to harvest your view of what has been in the last 25 years.
Well, in the last 25 years, I think it's been just one roller coaster that's really has presented for me lots of experiences that I think we should chronicle effectively and see how they play in the Nigerian equation. Democracy, that Greek word. We are still trying to grapple with the meaning and what is the content. And Prof has just referred to something that's so very critical, the content, the character. And I will also add the process. 1998, I was very involved in the politics. My idea of politics at the time, because my business was doing well, so I thought what we should have done was to support those who have the knack and the panache for politics. We did. But once, is it June? I think at that time we were still doing June. 1999 came. The conversation became different. We are expecting that we should have an increased participation. Regular Nigerians, superstar Nigerians, whatever level you are, you should be able to participate and have your voice heard. In the military, of course, it's just so narrow that the opportunities to serve are narrow, the dividends economically were also narrow. But of course, we had so many super rich folks. But 25 years, I would say 26, because you have to include 1998. Don't forget, 1998 was just the Washington time of the Abacha 1 million march and all that translated to 1999. Brought the president out at that time in jail in 1998 and then came up to become president of this country. I would have expected that for somebody who has gotten experience in different stratas, as a military leader and now as a democratic leader, if indeed we understood the meaning of democracy, this country should have been repositioned to grow in terms of the quality of leadership, the content of leadership, the value of leadership, and the inputs from everybody down to the grassroots. We didn't get that. So if 25 years is just a time that we are going to celebrate that we have done so many election cycles, and those elections, how were they characterized? Was there anything to learn from one election cycle to the other? We cannot say that that's happened, because it seems like in every time that the election comes, we get into the same kind of mudslinging, we get into the same kind of character assassination, we get into the same cycle of violence. We get into the same, cycle of, semi, imposition or even imposition in some cases. So I would say that 25 years is a good time to say, yes, we have really tried for democracy to thrive. We've been in self-rule, but we should look more in terms of how it has impacted in the psychology, in the economy, in the human development, even in the infrastructural development. So these are benefits that we expect from democracy, no doubt. But personally, I will say that we are just like scratching the surface to begin.
I'm going to push you to the area that is supposedly your area of specialization, which is the economy.
Yes.
In 25 years,
Yes.
has democracy risen up to the occasion? Has he given the expected benefits in the economy, both at the individual and collective level?
Well, when you ask me questions like this, you want me to be as straightforward and honest as possible.
Yes.
Because we have to help our country. And if we're going to help our country, certain levels of diplomacy and carefulness should not play. What should play is truth. Now, in the area of the economy, today, where are we? In 1998, where were we? And I do not want to bother about equating our forex as a basis on which our economy should grow. We should see how our economic plans has evolved, the content of the plan, and how it is implemented. Because if you do not have a clearly defined roadmap of how to grow our economy from day one in June 1999, we could certainly still miss the road by June 2024. And that is a very sad story to say, because today what we have seen is paper billionaires. And I say paper billionaires because that doesn't really grow the economy. What is the input of anybody that today considers himself as a billionaire? What's his input into how the seasons and the times and the content of even his own local place has been impacted by politics? Rather, we have seen a situation where a councillor gets elected with borrowed money from, family and friends, and then in 2 months, you see him with a brand new Jeep. You see him with buying land off the communities. You see him building homes that are completely bigger than the resource that he should have. Now, those impact our economy negatively because then the purchasing power of the few now emasculates the rest of Nigeria. So that does not in any way help us with our economic growth. I would rather like to see a plan where from day one, we are drawing a roadmap as to how we should become export sufficient, trading not just within West Africa or Africa, but even within ourselves, because we have a sizable population to be able to trade and grow our economy inwardly. We should be able to see how our giant size impacts in the African continent. Because there's everything in this country to make the economy to be buoyant and active. Not just oil and gas. We have different kinds of minerals. And today, we are putting on all manners of dress wear. And most of these dresses are not even from trees. They are all from gas and from petroleum products and different kinds of additives. So the economy has really not been impacted positively, in my opinion. And the only way I think we can do this is to grow the grassroots work ethics, character ethics, input into the economy by the little artisanal work they do the income they earn as teachers or as bicycle repairers or as mechanics, and pay sufficient tax that is commensurate to what they're earning, or even be encouraged. As I was expecting to see how we should grow a similar organization like the SBA of the America, that is the engine room, the catalyzer of the American, dream. So when those things are not in place, we just cannot say that we are doing well, because it's not sufficient to tell us we have millions of billions of dollars in reserve. And in 2 months, it's all depleted because we had to be import dependent to import petroleum product and import toothpick and different kinds of things. So we should have a plan to grow our economy systematically from ground zero up. And the good news is that it's not too late. We have a president today that's a businessman. It's an accountant. And if my understanding of accountants are correct, they are very frugal and very detailed in how processes about money issues and growth issues are handled. So I believe that if the president will put his economic team together and redirect their energy as to how they can grow the small farmer, the small fisherwoman, the artisans, the small businesses, the micro businesses, the medium-sized businesses, and keep growing to that, we will see how this country will suddenly become, because there is nothing we can do if we don't have the money.
So the whole value chain ought to be
in place.
Yes.
And it has to be with a plan. So we should not do it with every regime coming and having a different agenda. We should have a plan that should drive the process even into 2099. We should be able to have our plans.
We used to have a national ruling plan, but that's another story completely. But let's bring in Professor Adele Jinadu now. We apologize for the loss of signal there. But Prof, thank you. It's good to have you back. While you were gone, for instance, for that moment, we were talking about the content and character of the Nigerian democracy in the last 25 years. What do you consider to be that content and character? Has it met up to the global best practices or standards, as it were?
Yeah, thank you, Imoni, and it's nice to be back with you. As I was listening to the last part of the presentation by my friend here, something just struck me. The crisis of capitalism, it is in crisis everywhere. And in the developed country, they've been able to sustain the crisis and manage it because they developed the state, provided the solid foundation on which you can grow. Forget about all this talk of market forces. Market forces, whatever they are manipulated everywhere. The market is never competitive and it's never equal. So the state has a fundamental role to play in trying as far to equalize the system. The state played that role in the developed countries, and it is still playing that role. But here, we have not solved that political problem. And we cannot be talking of dealing with the crisis of capitalism we have in this country without going back to the basic political problem. And that basic political problem, don't worry about what people say about liberal democracy is not appropriate. The point is that we have resolved that question in Chapter 2 of our Constitution. You need a developmental state, a state in which the state allocates surplus based in terms of the criteria laid out in Chapter 2. Because without Chapter 2, you cannot attain what you hope to do in Chapter 4 in terms of civil and political liberties. We have been running away from that Chapter 2. And the Constitution provides for it and says that political parties must go by. So that is where we need to go back. You cannot deal with the economic problem because it is interwoven with the political problem. we're talking all these days, I mean, since this new regime came in, focus mainly on the economic problem. But the fundamental political structure that should hold it is not there. Britain, America was built on the concept of the welfare state. Before Reagan and the lady in Britain, Margaret Thatcher, came and tried to reverse it, and they are still, and that struggle is still on between those on the right and those on the left in terms of the direction of the state. But here, there is no other voice than the voice of all these free market people who talk about the free market. Then the market is fictitious, and even in reality, it is in reality, it is not free. And it is manipulated. And we see how the central bank itself has been manipulating the economy just to get the naira up and to deal with inflation. So the point I'm making is that you need that. We need to go back to that problem. And I think the problem is that we are running away from it. And I'm really scared because now what you find is all these state power advocates. And as I said before, this has always been part of the strain of Nigerian federalism. Those who want little role for the federal government and more role for the state government. And they've been succeeding so that all Nigerian institutions are being paralyzed and they are being made to fail. So I think the basic issue is not whether you want it to go, but go solve that political problem. And Chapter 2 has provided it. And you need to put this in the context of the global debate also, because the Western powers, the developers, don't believe in Chapter 2. And that is why the World Bank keep coming back and saying, look, let the private, private sector, let the blah, 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 but what they forget is that the foundation has been, it was a conservative government in Britain under Macmillan. I mean, when Macmillan was in government in the 30s, as a member of that built the welfare state in Britain. And by the end of the 40s, 50s, there was a consensus between the right and the left in Britain called between Butler and the Rab Butler and Hugh Cascale on the welfare state to provide that solid foundation. But here today, people talk of internally generated revenue, do this, but that is only what for rent. That's what rent seekers use. We are talking of palliatives today. When palliatives are immersed in corruption, we are not talking about how can you institutionalize package a welfare package that will take care of absorb shocks for the country. So
Okay,
I think
Prof.
We are getting the debate wrong.
Okay, Prof, let me interject there and also allow you to sit back a little bit so that your pictures can be a bit better. Fine, good. Now, you talked about Chapter 2, and the argument has always been that the Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution is not justiciable, and that it can only become effective if the provisions of Chapter 2 are justiciable. Can we achieve that under the present dispensation?
That is rubbish. Because the same constitution provides that if and where a House of Assembly or National Assembly provides for Chapter 2, then it becomes law. So the issue is, why have they not made it into law? Secondly, we have entered into international organizations where we have agreed to provide certain basic, the SDGs, the MDGs, they are also about Chapter 2, and we have been bound by it. Although we are a federal system, and if you domesticate at the federal level, you should also domesticate at the state level. But we are not doing that. In any case, what makes it important, even if it is not justiciable, it does not say you should not do it. So why should it not be done? Why should it not be done? We did a study some years back. Look at budgets. 10 states in the Federation between 2004 and 2012. Budget for housing, for water and sanitation, for health, for education, and one other social infrastructure, I think infrastructures, occupy less than 7% of the budget of all these states. And when you talk of actual budget released, they are less than 5%. So what are we talking about? The justiciability is irrelevant. The Constitution does not say you should not provide it. If you provide it, you're not acting unconstitutionally. And Chapter 2 says that government, public authorities shall have the welfare and security of the people as their mantra. It is not done. Other African countries have Chapter 2. India has Chapter 2, the equivalent. And that is the basis of their social welfare. In the US, example, when the politicians were away from trying to bridge the virtual. So when people say here that it is not justiciable, that is for me rubbish, because nothing says it should not be done.
All right, Prof. Thank you so much. Stay with
So
us.
I think we need to get the political problem first. And there's a lot of diversion from that. We are concerned about, because even the government is setting the markets.
Okay, Prof, stay with us. Let me try and harvest the views of Professor Abiodun Adeniyi here. A lot has been put on the table, both by Dr. Harry and Professor Jinodu. And here, Dr. Harry has talked about the quality of leadership and the quality of life in the last 25 years. And Prof has now talked about how that could have been achieved if those who have been elected to various offices who have governed in the last 25 years have probably paid more attention to Chapter 2 of the 1999 Constitution.
I think somehow I agree with both of them completely. First, let me start with Prof. Prof, from my understanding, is talking about the lack of ideology, the lack of a framework, around which we can frame our development. In the early stages of our development, we used to talk about mixed economy, because there was this polarization between capitalism and socialism. But because we wanted to just stay in the middle, we wanted to be neutral, we talked about mixed economy where we adopt the best of the two. But as time went by, we just became somewhat confused. We were neither here or there. In the military era, we remember President Babangida talking about a little to the left and a little to the right. So some kind of confusion. Oftentimes, we've been having different administrations as well, steeped in different political ideologies, so-called ideologies, political parties without ideologies anyway, and political parties being special purpose vehicles, no ideological foundation. So they just come, from one regime to the other, a different philosophical, economic framework, sometimes knee-jerk, sometimes episodic, not inconsistent, no framework, And of course, if there had been some kind of commitment, especially around the Chapter 2 that Prof is talking about, of course, it would have been grown into a framework around which we can say, okay, that's what our economy is built upon. If you talk about the United States now, we know it's clearly the bastion of capitalism. If you talk about Canada, yes, it's capitalist. If you talk about Nordic Scandinavia countries, you know that you're getting close to welfareism. The United Kingdom that he mentioned, of course, fundamentally it's welfareist. Where would you place Nigeria? Around where? What kind of ideological framework would you say we really belong to? And of course, if we have a framework, it doesn't really matter which political party is in government. If whether they are PDP or APC or anything you want to call it, the overarching philosophy that will guide them, will be confined to that fundamental framework as nested in Chapter 2, as the case could be. So that's the deficiency that we have, and that deficiency can also be attributed to the question of leadership that relates more to what Dr. Harry is talking about. Because yes, we know democracy. I identified earlier that yes, sometimes you can also have a kind of government that is not necessarily democratic, but it can bring about development through facilities, through infrastructure. But then democracy is an added advantage, because beyond infrastructure, beyond facilities, it should also bring some other values, freedom of speech, fulfillment, integration, inclusion, etc., etc. Yes, those are fine, but then it cannot be done. It can only be done through the instrumentality of individuals, working through institutions. But when institutions are weak or deliberately made to be weak, or when the institutions are circumvented for the benefit of individuals, then of course you'll be talking about, that's why we'll be talking about state capture, or you'll be talking about man the human being stronger than the institutions. And the state will be existing not to serve the people, but rather to serve individuals, who are ordinarily privileged, to have captured the levers of government, as the case could be. And so overall, I think there's still room. There's still room for correction. There's still room. There's a place for hope. There's a room for us to do some recalibration, possibly, and of course, create a definite pattern for ourselves. First, at the realm of ideology, and that ideology should something that can be ingrained in the minds and hearts of our putative leaders. Putative because some of them may not necessarily be so, but of course they are there, so we do not have any option other than to see them as some kinds of leaders, leaders, politicians, or those seeking to be in government. This people-centric disposition, a disposition that moves service to being away from the self, to the larger community. And that's why oftentimes I talk about the concentric circle of leadership. In our own system, that circle is one that should have the leader in between. Then, of course, you have the family, associates, nest, and the community, right? But in our own situation, right, rather than serving the community first, our leaders start with the self, the family, and our churches before they think about the community. And that's the bane of our development. And that's what Dr. Ari also said, that has consistently been a disservice to the growth of our economy, where you have only a few people, probably richer than the state. And of course, the richness, being richer than the state, does not mean that they've been they've added anything productive to the economy. It's just through the manipulation of the system. And of course, Prof also mentioned it. The manipulation come through state capture indirectly, and the state tweak the levers, the opportunities in their favor, and that's why they are at advantage. So we have to think of reversing these trends, through a greater commitment to serving the people, in accordance with the concerted circle of leadership that has a leader at the center, and of course, with the leader at the center, next should be service to the community before you think about associates and friends, as the case could be.
You were there at the beginning. Yes. I mean, 78, 79, when, as a journalist, you reported the processes that led to the emergence of the democratic process.
Yeah.
And now you have just talked about the whole process of leadership evolution. Yeah. Would you say that perhaps our leadership recruitment process has contributed to the weaknesses of the democratic system that we have today?
Definitely, Mark. Definitely has contributed. Because most times if you do the statistics, if we do the research, you see that the best of us are hardly in politics. Most of the time, I mean, if you do, I'm not sure anybody has done that consequential research, but if you look at it, the best of us are hardly in politics. And these are the people that end up becoming our leaders, growing through taking advantage of opportunities, privileges, perks and perquisites, or that are offered by the state to ride over us, as the case could be, where you may not blame them because that's the situation. But again, there should be a way in which, the process can be tighter, much more stronger to encourage those who probably have the ability and not through sheer possession of sleazy capital, slush funds through which the system can be manipulated to the disadvantage of those who are otherwise competent, but unfortunately, not capacitated enough to go into politics and, of course, eventually governance. So overall, from the beginning to now, there's a fundamental problem with that recruitment process, and of course, it's one more thing that we probably need to focus on, so that we can have people, of more credible people, getting into the system, and sometimes it shouldn't be away from the politics of compensation, of loyalty, of reward, because these are people, that get in there and continue the culture of neo-patrimony, where the state is simply harnessed as a structure to serve the interests of the self. And of course, if it's not serving the interest of the self, the family, that of the family, that of friends, or those of clans, that's the bane of our development, and that's something we need to work against.
Dr. Harry, you need to weigh in on this now as we look at the future of democracy in Nigeria? Let's look at, say, the next 3 years, in the next, say, 8 years or 12 years. What does the future look like for democracy in Nigeria? Will it grow? Will we be able to strengthen our institutions to function the way we want them to function, or the way they ought to function? Not the way we want them to function, because the way we want them to function might be different from the way they should function. From all that has been said, we have been able to manipulate institutions to serve the self rather than serve the community.
Well, my take there is that, first of all, this is our country. And we don't really have any other. Even if we have passports of any other country, we'll never be their citizens. Because when you talk about what is yours, you will pay attention to it and you will grow it. We have a hope. Then we now have a new mantra, renewed hope. So, in my thinking, when there's hope, there is opportunity for change and things to be done more better. So, the first thing that comes to my mind there is that a political party is just a vehicle to introduce a leader on the stage. But that political party is not the country. So the moment a leader is procured, and I use the word deliberately procured, because we have a very big problem on how our leaders are being recruited. So whichever way a leader has emerged, as the Bible says, nobody becomes a leader if God did not approve it. So sometimes we need to just rest with that. But here's my problem, my take. The moment you become a leader of any sort, whether you're a councillor or you're a state legislation officer, or you're a governor, or you're a deputy governor, or you're a National Assembly member, or you're the president, you drop the values of party and embrace the values of the states, of the country. Now, in that context, a renewed hope agenda can be a catalyst to change our political history. Because when you look at all the points that were made in the campaign structure and the campaign and the manifestos, you see that there is an element of enthusiasm to change. But it's one thing to think, another thing to write, but the most important thing is to practicalize and enforce and empower and make manifest those dreams. Now, if that is what we're going to be doing in our renewed hope agenda, there is hope for this country. And like I said, we have a president who is a businessman, very successful businessman, and he's also an accountant. He's a chartered accountant. He has ideas that he should make all parties of Nigeria inclusive to change the dream. And by the way, what is this mantra about 8 years, 8 years, 8 years? Well, please, can we focus on the 48 months that you have and do it well so that the people can evaluate that and based on that, be the people to yin for you, not you coming. So with these few points I have just presented, Nigeria has a prospect of growing. And also, a lot of Nigerians are beginning to realize that no matter how rich you are, you're going to sit only on one chair. And there are those who have been rich, who have been stupendously rich before us. The cars they used to drive that looks like it's the world, today, they are just rotting away in some garage, somewhere in some village.
Antiquities.
So clearly, what we need is our happiness, the content and the quality of life we live, and what we drop back. Yes, there will be bad guys in the system. This is an ecosystem that must tolerate everybody. But where we're headed is simple. Let's change the content of even our democracy. Okay. Let's domesticate it. That should be what I don't want us to worry about welfarism or capitalism or socialism. These are ideologies that came out when no Nigerian was part of the process. So now we as Nigerians, we are adult enough, educated enough, reasonable. There is no endeavor in this world that Nigeria is not a leader. So we must be able to get back home and change the narratives so that even before we pass this generation, the next ones coming will know that it will be much more better to grow the people than to grow self.
All right, Professor Jinadu, let me just ask you very quickly what you think will be the trajectory of democracy moving forward.
Look, Imoni, we have been subjected to a lot of failed hopes. And our problem is that we keep turning those who are actually evil men into heroes overnight. The solution, the way forward, because when somebody talks, you look at the antecedents in terms of the moral standing, the character, and we must have some idea by which we judge character. So you need ideas as very, very important. Now, my problem is this, my focus is, look, it is about time Nigerians wake up and take the future into their hands. One thing I like about liberal ideology is that it says eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. See, they have told us so many lies in the past. They've been in government, we know what they did. And you know, it is easy. These are hollow words, what Claude Ake called defensive radicality. They know what we want to hear. They don't believe in it. It's like the teacher, you say, look, should we do what you preach or we'll do what we see you actually doing? It is time for Nigerians to take the initiative and hold their political leaders accountable to their words. Eternal vigilance. Let us now, all of us, we must begin taking it in public affairs and provide an alternative voice to that which is being given. I have had so much of renewed hope before the present government, the previous one, the one before, and so on and so forth. It is the same thing they've been saying. Believe in us. We mean, but when you look at it in terms of the antecedents and what they actually do, look, what have we done? The state has failed us in every respect. Go through my estate here now. The state cannot provide security. We have gated our communities. We have employed vigilantes. What can be more important than your liberty, your right as a citizen under Chapter 2? That you cannot now hold government accountable. Those who have been stealing from you, they still keep saying, we will not steal again. We will not steal. When they were part of the old government, where were they then? We know the whole process of selection of leadership in the political parties is sham. It's a sham. So, but I have been to countries in Africa where citizens, their right to civil disobedience, they make it clear. Their right to protect themselves, they make it clear. So if you cannot defend your right as a citizen, so why are you then protecting your own house and your own community from pillagers? So what I'm saying is that Nigerians must now learn to ask questions.
Okay.
Government tell lies everywhere. Not only in Nigeria, they tell lies everywhere. So we must believe them. We must not just believe them. Take them to task in terms of what they are doing. So the responsibility is on you and I to assert our voice and to let them hear these words they don't want to hear.
Eternal
because they
vigilance.
think they have brought us to their money.
Eternal vigilance, Prof.
It's the price of liberty. Don't
Thank
start
you
talking,
so much.
let's believe in them. Let's give them time. How much time are we going to give them?
We have given them a quarter of a
And yet the
century
people
already.
down there.
Thank you so much, Prof. Professor Adedi, your last word here. What do you see as the future of democracy in Nigeria?
Well, I think I'm not sure I have any other hope other than to continue to be hopeful that no matter what it is still better than the alternative that we know, but again, yes, we may say that it can be frustrating, the fact that we have not made substantial progress, but of course, the onus is now back on us, like Prof said, to be much more agitative, to be much more responsive as citizens, to put the feet of our leaders to the fire, so that they can help us achieve our dreams, our wishes and aspirations as much as possible, to the best of their ability, and of course, subject to the resources that are available to us. A situation where our resources, collective patrimony are constantly frittered away, covertly or openly, is not something, and it has become systemic, even not, if not endemic, it's not something that we can continue to behold the way we are doing, It is time for us to change the narrative, like Dr. also said earlier.
Thank you so much, Professor Adeniyi. Thank you so much. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi is the Dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies at the Base University and was the political editor of The Guardian in those days when we were together on the streets covering the political parties and the politicians. Thank you so much for your time. Professor Adele Jinodu, a renowned political scientist, he joined us virtually from his base in Lagos. Thank you so much, Prof, for always responding to us each time we call you. We thank you immensely. Do have a wonderful time for the rest of today and the week.
I'm going to send you my bill soon.
Thank you so much. and Dr. Billy Gillis Harry is an economist and the national president, Petroleum Products Retail Outlets Owners Association of Nigeria. He joined us here, right here in the studio. Thank you so much, Professor Harry.
Thank you so much, AIT.
And to our viewers out there, we want to thank you immensely for investing your time with us, and we look forward to bringing you another edition of the program. Bye for now.